Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, howdy, and hopefully all is now well for folks. Um, this is Dr. Brian David Phillips. Welcome you again to Passion Hypnosis, our free monthly webinar. This month we're dealing with intensifying intimacy and enhancing relationships. Today's webinar is about passion hypnosis. And what does that mean? Well, our specific subtitle, of course, is Intensifying Intimacy and Enhancing Relationships. And that's an umbrella for a whole bunch of things that hopefully in the next hour or so we'll be able to get through, at least the concepts and ideas related to enhancing relationships through intensifying intimacy, accelerating pair bonding, kickstarting sexual desire, and turbocharging orgasms as we magnify sexual response. Let's get to her. Now, this webinar isn't specifically about sexual or erotic hypnosis. I know I do a lot of webinars in eroticatrance, and I have a lot of products on my webpage related to that sort of material. You're certainly welcome to check that out in terms of the trainings I do or other things. However, today we're going to talk about intimacy. But let's go back a bit in terms of eroticatrance and ecstatic states and sensual connections between people. We can trace this sort of work a long ways back. If you go back to the 1940s, there were pamphlets being sold in the back of comic books related to sexual hypnosis. That is, folks having little products saying that if you buy my product, you will learn how to hypnotize any woman into your sexual slave. In fact, some people sold little things like this, which is, of course, the ever-present look into the spiral, look into the spiral, and you can see, oh goodness, what's going on? You're feeling so sexy, or not. Okay, and so these little devices were sold in comic books. Not as fancy as this one. You had to spin it yourself. This is motorized because I'm inherently lazy and do that. But these were sold in conjunction with the Hypno coins, of course, in conjunction with all sorts of things. The great Ormond McGill, one of the most highly respected hypnotherapists and stage hypnosis performers, actually co-wrote a book on sexual hypnosis. But we can go further back even. Some of the complaints against Anton Mesmer, the guy whose name became mesmerism, or he gave his name to animal magnetism, mesmerism, which is the direct father of hypnosis in the Western world. Some of the complaints against him by doctors were not just that he was healing people with quackery. They said it wasn't working. Actually, a lot of the complaints were based upon him stealing other people's business because he was more effective than the other doctors living in Paris at the time. But some complaints were based upon inappropriate sexual contact. And that's because when Mesmer worked with folks and they had the experience of an ecstatic state experience, which I'm very interested in, many of them experienced a sexual response. And that sexual response, or erotic response rather, they connected to working with him. Mesmer also probably touched a lot of pretty girls inappropriately. He touched a lot of folks inappropriately. If you remember, and if you don't remember, I'll tell you now. In mesmerism, there are the magnetic passes, the hand passes. And one of the factors of mesmerism is to, it's kind of like I live in Taiwan and we see Qigong masters do work where they energize themselves. So right now I can feel energy in my, yeah, it's right, it's heavy. In my hands I feel an energetic pass. And I can pass that energy to other people. So if you experience it, I can pass even through a television camera. I pass that energy. I can actually feel a flow now. All right, in Qigong, it's life force, or if you prefer, Star Wars fans, the Force. But no midichlorians. That's just nonsense. The Force isn't midichlorians. It's other stuff. But that energy passes through. Okay? Now, in classic animal magnetism, the way Mesmer worked, his hand passes weren't distance-based. In the century following him, in the 19th century especially, they no longer touched when they did the mesmeric passes. Rather, they did it at a distance, the way an Eastern Qigong master might do it, or a Reiki practitioner today. But back in Mesmer's day, he would touch people. And it's a downward stroke to relax them and send them into state. And then to emerge them from state, it's an upward stroke. Or downward passes causes a person to go into a hypnotic state. And then upward passes emerges them from it. Esdale, when he was working in India, he did mesmeric passes from that way. Downward means go into trance and then energize them, just, oh, come on up. All right, so when Mesmer was working with folks and sending them into what we now know to be a trance state or a hypnotic state, he would touch them. And it was really odd that when he worked with particularly attractive young women, his touches kind of focused on certain areas. I don't know why. I do know why. He was a creepy guy. Now, eventually, Mesmer couldn't work with so many people individually, so he started that's when he started doing with the pools and the rods in the pools, and people would get into a communal bath and things like that. But his earlier work in Paris, he was touching the young ladies, and sometimes he touched the young boys. And that caused some problems. So that's ecstatic states connected to a sexual response and a creepy old man. But we can go even further back, and we can see that trance states and ecstatic states, of course, as those of you who are familiar with my work know, are highly connected to human culture. All human cultures that we're aware of have developed some form of ecstatic state ritual. Trance states used in ritualized, often religious contexts, but they can also be used in non-religious or secular contexts. And in terms of couples and passion, we can use what is a natural response among humans to create some really interesting effects in a consenting adult relationship. Emotional connections and sexual connections, depending upon the context, can be increased through adaptations of ecstatic states. Okay? Now, there are a number of ways of doing this. Some of you are familiar with my work, so you already know one, which I will talk about, and that is the when two become one pattern. Now, this is essentially a method of imprinting a couple or a group of people. The process I work with when two become one, that's the actual process name. And if you're not familiar with it, you can check out my webpage. There are audio recordings on the site and things like that. But essentially, it works upon the gaze. Now, humans are interesting in that we get a lot of information through our sense of sight. That's why when the ancient Egyptians talked about the six senses, not the same six senses we talk about when we talk about five senses today, but in their model, the eye in the wedget, that circle in the middle of the wedget, tends to be the large part. Why? Because so much of our sensory data comes, that we're consciously aware of, comes through us visually. And because we have binocular vision that is stereoscopic in nature, it's even more important to us. And so we have sayings like, the eyes are the window of the soul. And they really can be in certain respects. Okay? Now, the two become one pattern is a consensual pattern. It is for adults in long-term or maintaining adult relationships. Okay? This is not something you do with a person that you just met. Hey, how you doing? Would you like to bond with me in a way that anchors us to an intimate response for the rest of our lives? Sure, no problem. Got nothing else to do today. Don't do that crap, okay? And you don't use this in a bar, in a pickup, or anything like that, because this is a process intended to intensify intimate connections between consenting adults. If you do this inappropriately with folks, you're going to have a stalker on your hands, or you're going to have a very angry person on your hands. This is a consensual pattern for two adults to go through the process together. Now, how does it work? Simple. It really is. It's incredibly simple. It is ritualized, and the reason it's ritualized, we don't have to do all the other stuff with it, but we do because that ritualized action intensifies the response. That's why we do the ritual part of it. You don't have to. You can just pop into someone's eyes and work with the power of the gaze. The power of the gaze is indeed that response we have where we look into another person's eyes and we see them seeing us. I see you. And we have a powerful emotional response. That response can be positive. Ooh, nice. Or it can be incredibly negative. Ooh, creepy. But you're going to have, when you look into another person's eyes, you have an emotional response. That's what we do. Healthy humans have emotional responses to other humans through the gaze, because the power of the gaze is so incredibly built. It's just built into our DNA. So to become one is a very straightforward process of two individuals. Now you take the two individuals. Hello, how you doing there? All right, so we have two people here. Yes, I realize they're not really people, but pretend. All right, so what they'll do is they will look into one another's eyes. Okay, how are you doing? Okay, we did this. All right, they're looking into one another's eyes, but there's a setup to this. And this is the hand positions, okay? One hand, typically the left hand, goes on the chest of the other person. So you take your left hand, place it on the chest of the other person, over their heart. Now you're not doing booby grabs or anything like that. You're just merely placing it over the heart. If you're in a sexual relationship with a person, you can do this naked. and it's really nice. Yeah, it's nice. You know, a dark room, candlelight, or low light if you don't want burning flames in your apartment because you know you want to be responsible and not start a fire. You have some low light, some gentle romantic music. Maybe you've got Ravel's Bolero in the background, or some Paganini, or not Bach, or Beethoven. No, why would you do Beethoven? But you have some romantic music in the background, and the lights are down low. Probably not naked or nude, but maybe nude under a bathrobe or something like that. And you place your hand upon the bare skin. Okay. Now, if you're not in a sexually intimate relationship, you're probably not going to be placing your hand on boobage or on bare skin. So you place it on the chest or over the heart. Most folks will place it over the chest because they assume the heart is here. It's actually a little bit over, but place it over the center is fine because that's the killing shot. All right, so place your left hand over there, or your right, it doesn't matter, but you both do it the same way. One hand goes over the other person's heart, and that person's hand goes on your heart, okay? And then your free hand goes upon that person's hand upon your chest, okay? Now, if you're not in an intimate relationship, you can switch that around so that you place your hand over your own chest and the other person places their hand upon your hand. If you're not quite comfortable with them touching you or you touching that person appropriately, you can do it this way, okay? Now, once you've done that, and usually you're sitting in a comfortable position facing one another, and breathe in, breathe out. And as you breathe in, imagine as if you're breathing in that other person's spirit. Now, you don't have to believe in spirits or souls or anything like that for this stuff to work. You just breathe in that other person's spirit. It can be a metaphor. You're not actually sucking in their soul. You're not a psychic vampire here. You're just breathing in the essence of the person and connecting. And as you breathe out, relax. Breathe in the other person. Breathe out and relax. Five to 10 deep breaths as you center. And just imagine breathing in that person. And then on the 5th or 10th breath, depending upon your relationship with that person, as you breathe out, close your eyes and relax. And continue to breathe in the energy of that person. Slowly, comfortably, together as one. And as you continue to breathe in, imagine as if you can feel that person's spirit connecting with your spirit. And as you continue to breathe and relax, imagine you can feel that person's flesh. Your flesh is touching their flesh. Their flesh is touching your flesh. Imagine it beginning to melt. And imagine those two separate flesh entities beginning to melt into one. Continue breathing together. Now, physiologically, you'll be aware of the other person's breath because you started together. And you have consented into this bonding ritual where you become one with that person. If you don't consent, don't do this, okay? If you're not sure, you want to pair bond with this other person, don't do this. This is very important because this process for many people can be extremely powerful stuff. And so it's very, very important that you only do this sort of thing with someone that you have an authentic relationship with and an authentic desire to connect with at a deeply meaningful, communicative, and emotional level. If you're only interested in getting laid, don't do this. It's extremely inappropriate. There are other things you can do to hook up with other human beings and have sex. This is not one of those processes. This is for folks who want an authentic connection that often becomes very permanent. So be aware of that. And if you are in an appropriate relationship where you wish to feel this sort of powerful connection, and you slip yourself into trance and feel the flesh melting, and you feel the connection with that person as you imagine as if a deeply energetic and deeply meaningful connection occurs, as the energy of your spirits, these separate entities, connect and merge into one, melting as if one, just and becoming one. All right, that's the spiritual aspect. And also feel the kinesthetic. Really feel it as if you can feel the flesh melting into the other person's flesh as that two become one. Some of you are aware of the Platonic idea, the old Socratic concept, pre-Socratic actually. Plato just played with it, but essentially the idea that before a man became flesh, he was spirit. And these spirit beings, these globes of spirits, were floating around the cosmos. And when the gods created man, they took these spirit beings, these souls, and pulled them apart. And so that goes into one, that goes into another. And your connection with another person is to seek out that other half of yourself. Now, in Hebrew belief, which I won't say borrowed, and I won't say stole, but I'll say is highly similar to pre-Hebrew beliefs of the creation of man. Now, in Genesis, there are multiple creation tales. So you have two, actually. The older one, God created man and woman together, okay, as equals. But the later one, God, hello little clay man, makes Adam, and Adam needs a companion, so God just rips out that rib, okay? Yeah, from the rib, I build me a woman. All right, now, that's one way of telling the tale. There's another way of telling that tale, which is actually older than the Genesis version that has been found in Babylonian and Sumerian scripts. And that is when the gods, we're now going plural, when the gods created man and wanted a woman, what they did was they took the foreskin of the first man, Adam's foreskin, and from that cut that little puppy off. Not the penis, the foreskin. It's different. It's a circumcision ritual. They take that foreskin, from that foreskin, They grew out a vagina, and from the vagina becomes a woman, and boom, you have man and woman, and that's why there's sexual attraction, is because this part wants to get back with this part. Oh, okay. I think that's a much more beautiful story, actually, than the story of ripping out somebody's rib. But that be there as it may, there's an idea that we come of one flesh, that we are one flesh and one spirit connected. And so to become one pattern or process, the intention here is to connect folks in a way that they are merging their spirits and their soul and their flesh. So really feel the kinesthetic illusion of melting flesh. If you've been practicing hypnosis, many of us, you have your auditory, your kinesthetic, and your visual responders. And some folks respond to certain types of suggestions more than others. If you've been practicing experiential hypnosis, you will find that your various response sets increase as well. For me, I'm a natural kinesthetic responder. I feel kinesthetic illusions, hallucinations, and suggestion much more easily than the visual and the auditory. I can do the others, absolutely, but I'm a highly kinesthetic responder. And some folks are more visual, some folks are more auditory, and you work on that through experiential hypnosis, and you can start building your setups so that you can have more visual, more auditory, more kinesthetic illusions. But feel it in your body as if the flesh merges, okay? And as you feel that hallucination, it's a kinesthetic hallucination, also feel as if the emotions and the spirit merge so that you're both breathing in one another. And as you breathe out, those two become one as you relax deeper and deeper into the sensation. And you will notice that the physiological setup of this ritual-based pattern enhances the suggestion as well. And so if my hand is upon another person's chest and also upon my own chest, and their hand is on my hand or my hand upon their hand, or I can feel both chests rise as we breathe in and both chests lower as we breathe out. That actually enhances the suggestion that this sensation here is the same sensation there, and that there and here are together, are both here. It's a sensation of the external becoming the internalized experience. This can be very similar to the effect of the false hand illusion. Some of you are familiar with the psychology experiment of creating an externalized stimuli so that an external part is sensorily experienced as an internal part. Setup of the false hand illusion. Essentially, I place my hand upon the table, okay? And we cover this hand with a cloth, so I cannot see it. But next to my hand, we place a false hand, okay? Usually a mannequin or a toy or whatever, something that looks like a hand, not a brush, but a hand, okay? And then what happens is this. The operator has two paintbrushes, and the operator has under the cloth, it's usually like a box, so that the operator's sitting across from you, and the operator brushes your real hand with the brush. At the same time, the operator is brushing the false hand with another brush. So as these two things feel like they're happening at the same time, what will happen is, because you don't see this hand, but you see this false hand, you start to experience as if this external hand is your hand. And then, of course, if you go on YouTube and look for the false hand illusion, you'll see the operator will eventually take a hammer and hit the false hand, and you will notice the screams of shock, surprise, and sometimes pain from the person who has felt, this is my hand. And when they realize they didn't actually feel the hammer, they just thought they did, there's a realization that, oh, that was me. I felt as if that was mine. Now, of course, because of virtual reality, Oculus Rift time, people are experimenting with false body illusions much more. But in R, when two become one process, what we're doing is we're creating an illusion just that simply. It only takes a little bit that we are connected with the other person. And if in the process you are genuinely feeling a suggestion of love, so as you breathe in that person, you also breathe in unconditional love anchored to that person. That's where your connection comes from. That's where your intensified intimacy comes from. You feel a sensation of sensuality, if you wish, or of love, just unconditional love. Now, this process can be adapted to numerous contexts. We can have a sexual desire in our connected state, or we can have other things going on. Now, this process, when I first started using this process, I developed it for couples, okay? And it was intended to enhance physical sensations of touch. Because touching another person, we pop off those intimacy hormones, and we get some wonderful bonding hormones going on in the brain and setting up some nice stuff. But also it's set up to use the power of the gaze, because the gaze is actually extremely, extremely powerful and extremely wonderful in that respect. We gaze into another person and we can have some wonderful, wonderful connections with them in that way. If you're familiar, say, with the work of Marina Abramovic and her piece on The Artist is Present, and if you go to my website, there is a web page link. Just type in Marina in the search and you'll get one of the top results is going to be Marina Abramovic's art collection, or her my English, you're so good today. Her piece on The Artist is Present, where essentially she sat in a chair for 8 hours a day, and members of the public would come in and sit across from her, and they would do soul gazing. They would look into one another's eyes. And if you look at the photos from that, they're absolutely beautiful. And she didn't say anything. She just kind of sat and she breathed and she looked into their eyes and they looked into her eyes, and you just sit for a few minutes. And what you'll find is many of these folks went through cathartic experiences. And so tears are streaming and joy is being experienced. There's a wonderful coffee table photo book of the portraits of people going through the experience. It's one of my favorites. I do have it. Yay. I don't have it here. It's in the other room. Sorry. I didn't even think of that. I should have brought it in and show you the pictures. But go to the site and you can check that out. It's absolutely beautiful stuff. Soul gazing, or looking into another person's eyes can be very powerful in terms of connecting. And because we know the power of trance, experiential, consensual, dual trance, we can do some wonderful things with that. Now, this was designed, as I said, I first worked with this process for couples, but it can be used for others as well. In fact, when I first released the audio file, oh God, more than a decade ago, this audio's been on my site. Wow. It's actually much older than that, but the audio version is about a decade. What is it? This is 2015, so 95. Might be a little older. But when I first released it, some folks asked me, Dr. Phillips, can I use this process with more than one person? And of course, I immediately misunderstood the question and thought, well, it's for pair bonding. And if you're wanting to have a loving, connected relationship with someone other than your primary significant other, I hope that it's with complete and informed consent. So if your wife is okay with you having a loving relationship with another woman, sure, go ahead. But I'd get permission. So, no, dude, I didn't mean that. I meant I'm in an intentional family or a poly relationship. Can we all use this together? And they did. And so for that, the process is a little different. So you're doing this with two people for pair bonding. Then, one hand goes on the other person's chest, over here. But if you're doing this with more than two people, say 3 to 5, and yes, 5 people have written me, or a group of 5 wrote me and said they had an absolutely wonderful experience. They kind of upped the ritual and had a nice little candle in the middle and the dark rooms, and they were all naked, kind of a coven type experience, but they had an absolutely beautiful group bonding experience. And that works a little differently. Instead of the person across from you is the person next to you. I place my hand upon this person's chest, and then this hand goes on this person's chest. Now this person over here, they've got a hand on my chest, and this person over here has a hand on my chest as well. So their 2 hands are meeting upon my chest. Okay? And so you can go that way. Or you can still keep your hand here on your chest, but that person's hand goes here, and you're bonding here. And so it's kind of everyone gets one of each. Okay? One group tells me what they did with 4 people was this hand goes on the person across, and this hand goes on the person next to them. And they kind of did it that way. You can do all sorts of experiences and setups for that, but the idea being that as you breathe in, you're breathing in and feeling the group, not just the one person. This kind of does that for you. It can be very comfortable if you have, if you're doing it with a bunch of large people, you're going to have to make sure you can reach things around. Or if you're doing it with small people, you're also going to have to make sure everyone's cool and all that. But it can be a wonderful bonding experience, a bonding setup, and that is pair bonding. Now, in terms of some of the other things for passion hypnosis, so this, look into my eyes, let's melt our souls together, in a non-creepy way. That can be great for pair bonding, and it's wonderful for enhancing and your relationship through intensifying your intimacy. And trust me, you run this process right, you're going to have some intensified, intimate experiences here. You really should feel an amazing connection with that person. And of course, you can do it more than once with the same person It can be a nice little loving ritual you have. Say, Saturday night, let's just do a little soul merging and merge our souls and bodies and spirits into one, just for a little good time. And then afterward, you make love. You don't have to. It's not required. There will be no exam for this, but it can be an incredibly positive experience. What are some of the other things we can do? I received a question via email. I tell folks, and I tell you, that if you can't make it to the live one, you can still ask questions, or you can hold off and ask questions here. But I did get a question on my question is, can I embed or disguise an instruction that will make the subject feel emotionally attracted or sensually attracted? Now, in your suggestions, yes, you can embed suggestions for increased attraction. This particular person asked, can I embed an instruction to have the subject feel emotionally comfortable or sensual, or something like that, as a post-hypnosis suggestion? I know how to do it with people that are close to me, but what about people who are getting close or not yet close enough? Now, I replied to this person via email, and I already told this particular gentleman that, well, that kind of violates a couple tenets. Notice that I said these suggestions, or the work I do, and in his message he does say that he has all of my videos, and I know he does. And so asked if there's a particular product that he could use. Unfortunately for him, no, there's not. And why is that? Because what's the key word that I always hit in all of my products and all my webinars of this type? That's consent, 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 informed consent. If he's trying to disguise the suggestion, that implies that it's not consensual. Okay, also, what did I just say about this particular process? You need to be in a relationship already, not one that's starting, because you're not quite ready, you're not quite there for that process. And so it's important that these kind of suggestions be done in relationships that are already mature. And by mature, I don't mean that, a certain age or you can't do it. I mean the relationship itself is mature. You can be 55 and be in an immature relationship, one that hasn't yet blossomed into a complete, a whole. Okay, and if you're not sure, then don't. Dang. Okay, so I would say for this person, my processes are inappropriate. If you already have a consenting adult relationship, then yes, you can give suggestions for enhanced intimacy and enhanced sensual response. We're going to get into that in a second. But if you don't already have a mature, intimate relationship, I would strongly suggest you not do that. Now, when he asks, is there a way to disguise the suggestions so that when you hear my voice, you feel real good, and whenever you're with me, you feel wonderful and desire to crave that attention and connection more, more, more? Well, if you're in a relationship and the person wants that sort of response, go for it. Just say what I just said in hypnosis on a consenting state. But if the person isn't consenting to it, well, in psychology, there's a phrase for this that's absolutely, completely appropriate. Don't be an asshat dick. Don't be a dick. Don't try to control. By asking about covert or disguised suggestion with someone who's not quite there yet, that tells me you're trying to control or manipulate another person. And yeah, there are folks out there who teach that sort of thing, or claim to teach that sort of thing. When you look at some of the PUA stuff, you'll see that some folks in their marketing say that's what they're teaching, that's what they're doing. But actually what they're teaching and what they're doing isn't what they say it is. 80% of them is actually just straight up talking with folks. And I'm all in favor of folks having more confidence to just talk to other people. The ones who say that they can get you to have sex with any woman within 10 minutes, most of them are doing a fun thing called lying to you because they want your money. And I have no interest in lying to you in that respect, but also I have no interest in teaching you how to manipulate other human beings. If you know anything about my work, you know the quintillion paradigm. And if you know me personally, you know that I deeply believe in the quintillion paradigm. Don't know what that is? Then go to my YouTube channel or my webpage and search quintillion paradigm. Or just go to the video on YouTube. And you'll see that it's based on the idea of the essence of communication is a good man speaking well, and that is we speak to others, we work with others therapeutically and elsewhere, even recreational work, with their best interest at heart. We are not here to manipulate others merely for personal gain. Don't get me wrong, personal gain is optional. Is awesome. I love it when folks buy my products, but I'm not going to cheat you into doing that. I'm not going to manipulate you into doing that. And when I did discuss this with this particular person, he asked, could you advise me where I can learn that? A book, a course, a person? Simple answer to that, no, I won't. I won't tell you who can and will teach you creepy manipulation techniques. But if you're interested in methods and processes that allow you to genuinely connect with other human beings, come on back to me and I'll help you as much as I can. Now we do have a question via the Hangouts, and the question coming is, would the pair bonding work with me and my boyfriend who I talked to on Skype? Actually, the question was, would pair bondage work? Pair bonding and pair bondage are two different things. I'm going to go with bonding. Bondage, yeah, on Skype you can do that too. Go to my site and look up hypnotic bondage, and you could just, you know, if he's hypnotizable and you got it fun, you can have him paired up against the wall, unable to move, while you, through Skype, use your little tickle feather on all parts of his body. The eroticatrance set that we have actually does have an example of hypnotic bondage. But we're going to go with pair bonding, which is what the two into one process. Our questioner says that she and her boyfriend have a wonderful and mature relationship, and he is very interested in having a relationship with her. And so yeah, actually yes, it will work. Now it's a little trickier because on Skype, or right now I'm on a webcam, you're watching me through a camera, and I can see the person I'm Skyping with. So you've got the big image and you've got the little small image as you. Now if I look into the eyes of the person on screen, so I'll get a little closer so you can see a little closer. Now here I am looking into the eyes of the person on my screen. Now what's the problem? It looks like I'm looking away now, and so I need to look into the camera. Now if I'm looking into the camera, I can't see his or her eyes anymore. I'm looking into the camera. And so we need to modify the process of when you run the process, you hold up your hands. And so I still imagine as if the person's hand is touching me. And I imagine as if I'm touching the other person's hand. Now, if you want, you can touch the screen. If you don't have a touch screen, you may or may not want fingerprints on your screen. So you can just hold your hand up. So if you're holding your hand up, and you also have a hand upon your chest, we can imagine as if our hands are touching, and this is just an anchor set, okay? And so imagine your fingers are touching my fingers, and my fingers are touching yours. And then instead of looking at the eyes of the person on the screen, I look into the lens. And imagine a connection with that person. That's how I would do it. You may also do the same thing by looking into the eyes of the person on the screen. It won't be quite the same because of that connection difference, but you're doing it consensually and you're doing it through suggestion, so it's okay. And after 5 or 10 deep breaths, you're both closing your eyes anyway. And so it won't matter if your eye contact is there or not. It certainly enhances the experience, but it's not required to have the gaze aspect. I prefer it. I prefer to look into the camera and imagine that I am connecting with you, that I see you and you see me, and that we are somehow communicating in a way that connects us, body, mind, spirit, and soul. But we don't require the eye contact for the process. If you're doing it in person, use the eye contact because that's a wonderful anchor set. That's a hook for it. Now there are other things we can also do to enhance sensual responsiveness to one another. And this is where we get into passion. And so if we work with one another, we can guide our partner through a hypnotic experience. And when we guide them through the hypnotic experience, we can set post-hypnotic suggestions or hypnotic suggestions for sensual response or erotic response. If you're familiar with my website, your experience with my previous work, you are familiar with the work I do with erotic hypnosis. So you're already there. And if you're not already there, then we've got the website is on my tagline here. The lower third has my name and my webpage and all that stuff. You can go surf and look around there. There's lots of stuff there. An essential aspect of this is when you pop them into trance, however you do that, whatever hypnotic process you use, I suggest instead of immediately go for the money shot, you're not after that. Go for intensifying arousal. And so have the person just breathe in the sensual experience. And you can suggest feeling an erotic feeling, obviously in the appropriate context and the appropriate consenting adult relationship. So as they breathe, they feel that sensual response. I like breathing. I think breathing is awesome. And so I hook that in quite often to intensifying whatever sort of experience or suggestion I'm giving. So if I say sexual experience or sexual feelings, breathe it in and feel it even more powerfully. Now you can also tweak that by having them feel sensations say in their nipples or in the penis or the vagina, the anus, whatever their sensuality zones. You can also set that up. But instead of going for raw sexual response, which we cover elsewhere, so you feel the penis tricks and all those things, but you just sensual experience. And as you breathe in, just imagine as you feel that sensation of sensual longing, sensual desire. Imagine as you listen to my voice, that can increase even more powerfully. You can connect it there. But typically, breathing and counting. So breathe in, feel that sensuality. Breathe out, the body relaxes. Or the mind relaxes, rather. And breathe in, the body just gets more and more turned on. And then I start doing counting sets. Now the counting sets I do is first we go counting up. Each number doubles that. Some of you are familiar with the dialed deepener. And hypnosis, we can have 3 dials, and the dials are set up so that when you turn the dial one number, it doubles your relaxation. And the second dial, we do it together. Each number is 5 times deeper. The third dial is my dial. Every time I turn it up, each number is 10 times deeper. That's a deepener. If you're not familiar with dial deepeners, check out my webpage, my core hypnosis skills. I teach that. It's a very simple, straightforward process. But here's the thing. Dial 1, 1 to 10, dial 2, 1 to 10, dial 3, 1 to 10. You can use that for sensual response as well. And what you're doing is you're transferring control from the person to us, to me, the guide. So at that third dial, I become the one who's in control of the sensual response. And it's much more powerful. Now we can take that number click and we can also set it to snapping fingers, which is how I originally learned it. Or as some of you are aware, I use clickers. Not familiar with clicker training for humans, go to the acoustic pleasure device on my YouTube channel, and there's a lot there. But you can also set that to a touch or a phrase. But what I want to do is I want to build them up, that sexual or erotic response, higher and higher and higher and higher. But I don't want them to orgasm. I want them to get to the point where they're very much overloaded with sexual response and wish to have fruition. That is, they want to orgasm. When they're ready to orgasm, I then have them count. They count 1 to 10, and each number they say is more and more powerful, and the number 10, they just go boom. Okay, now here's the thing. If you're in a consenting adult relationship and you're right there with the person, you can also hold their hand. It says the more you squeeze, and so the more you squeeze, the more sensual and erotic and sexual you feel. The harder you squeeze, the stronger the sexual response. Now let's start squeezing your hand as you start counting. Getting up higher and higher. When they get to 9, say wait for it. And when I say 10, boom. Whatever boom means. I don't know. But when I say 10, I also squeeze their hand. They've been squeezing my hand. They're probably crushing my bones. But then I squeeze. And there's that intense experience that's absolutely marvelous for a lot of folks. So you can play with that as well. And then you set a post-hypnotic suggestion. Now your post-hypnotics for sensual response can be anywhere. Okay, it can be a word, it can be a touch. I strongly suggest behind the ear. So when I touch you behind the ear, you feel sensual. You feel sexually connected. You feel an intimate connection with me, a loving response or whatever. Now, why do I say behind the ear? Because a lot of people find that an erogenous zone. You kiss someone or lick them right there. Ooh, that's nice. But also, and this is something I learned long ago when I was half the man I am today, when I was at university. And graduate school is when I learned a lot of cool stuff. Before I made the connection between hypnosis and sexual response, I'm old. We didn't have the internet, so we didn't know this stuff. Had I known back then what I know today, oh yeah. But I didn't. But I learned that I could create responses in people, well, people being women, that that there was a method of kissing that I would use. Okay, so for me, one hand went to the small of the back, right above the buttocks. Okay? One hand went to the small of the back, right above the buttocks. The other hand, well, that sucker snaked around the back of the neck, so my fingers touched them, hello, behind the ear. Okay? Not in this position. This is just weird. But you're reaching around the person, and then as I pull them in with the bottom hand, I pulled them in. I came in for a deep kiss. I kiss weird. Okay, it's a really intense thing that I just learned spontaneously, and I learned that in this position and the way I kiss, which is a deep soul kiss, the woman's body just melts. I mean, literally melts, as if she just becomes a loose rag doll or a loose thing melting into me. Okay? I didn't know at the time that I was setting anchors. I was setting up response sets. And so all I had to do is just touch them in a certain way, and from then on they just melted. Okay? Now, as a hypnotist who's had a lot more experience, I know that I can accelerate that process through suggestion. And so we do that. We can give suggestions in very positive ways for arousal. Those of you already familiar with my work know that I believe in both arousal triggers and orgasm triggers. Okay? Now, of the two, most people will ask me about orgasms. How do I do the orgasm? I want to come. I want to make her come. I want to just look at a person and they go boom, boom, boom. Okay, that's fun. And it's more than fun. It's awesome. But the arousal trigger, that connection, that's both emotional connection and sensual response, is so much more powerful. And so if you choose between the two, arousal, okay, and then of course set your orgasm triggers for whatever they are. And these can be used during sexual activity if you're in a consenting sexual relationship between consenting adults, mature adults preferably, or it can be used other ways, but you can have some really interesting things happening. Okay? And, oh wow. Okay, that's it. If you have further questions, please feel free to message me on email or message through Facebook or whatever. You can ask your questions. If you'd like more on this or other topics, let me know so that I can help you. Help me help you. Seriously, we do these webinars because we want to help folks. And so if you've got questions, ask. Be sure to click subscribe on my website or become a member of the website. Click subscribe on YouTube, and I will post the next webinar topic soon, and I hope to see you there. So take her easy. Okay. Live trance and prosper. Bye-bye.